The mentality and behavior of drug addicts and alcoholics is wholly irrational until you understand that they are completely powerless over their addiction. And unless they have structured help, they have no hope. Russell Brand.
The world as a majority views the conversation of addiction and drug addicts like a broken record. Recovered one day, but in rehab the next. Over and over until their lost life becomes another statistic.
We would like the message of our documentary to end the stigma of people who lose their battle against heroin as not just being addicts, but being people who are at a constant mental war against themselves.
If help is available, overcoming the mental battle against heroin is possible.
When I was growing up, my childhood honestly was great. My parents were divorced, but my mom and dad were remarried. My step-parents were great step-parents, the best you could probably ask for. You know, a lot of times when you talk to addicts, that's where the story starts, that there was a bad childhood. But that's not always the case. I had a great childhood. School, I did struggle with school. I dropped out of high school. We moved when I was 16 from where I had grown up, and it was a different kind of neighborhood. And I just felt like I didn't fit in. And I think my mom made the best choice that she knew at the time to let me stay home and attempt to do it on the computer. I just didn't do it. I was in a very rebellious stage. So then I started doing the schooling online. I wasn't doing that. So then I said to my mom that I wanted to move out on my own.
Brian was a handful. He was a good kid, but he was a little rambunctious. Loved his cars, loved his bikes. He did karate, baseball, soccer, basketball was his favorite. And he loved cats. Friends, when Brian made a friend, he made a friend forever. So he was just a good kid.
I was very smart, but I thought that I was smarter than I was, you know? Then I was out on my own at 16. I had all these bills to pay. That's a lot of pressure. Then all of a sudden I'm working 2 jobs. I'm not finishing school anymore. And that's actually when I met the father of my 2 oldest boys. He's no longer involved. He was very abusive, physically, emotionally. He was also the first person to introduce me to snorting pills. I was dancing at the time, which of course is easy money. You start to get into the lifestyle when you're stripping. You have all this cash every night. Eventually, things progress. So then you start using more pills every night, you know, and because it makes it easier. And then our bar got raided. And this actually still sticks with me today, the charge that I got that night. You have to have a special license when it's a strip club to be able to show your breasts. The bar owner and the barmaids, they're going to make more money, of course, if you flash your breasts. I'm 18 years old, 19 years old. I don't know that you need a special license. I know that I work at a strip club and that every other stripper flashes her boobs. All of a sudden the lights go on. There's cops everywhere. It was very scary. So I got the charge, just a misdemeanor, but unlawful action in a sexually oriented business. Well, when you read that on paper, that sounds like you're, you know, a prostitute. There's no explaining that. As soon as you start to say, well, I was just a stripper, and, you know, they don't, forget it. So that was terrible that I got that charge. I had never been in any trouble before ever, you know, with the law or anything. So after we got raided, then the bar wasn't doing good business anymore. And then that's when you start to do other things for money, because now you have this addiction. Then I started hanging out with my cousin, who I grew up with. We were very close. And she was using heroin. I had just used pills for probably like four or 5 years at this point. You know, when you don't have pills, you get sick and you're desperate.
I was separated when Brian was about 15 years old. It was just very hard on him. I am not saying that's why he started. I'm just saying that was part of it. But I'm thinking what happened was he was in a few motorcycle accidents, And I think he started with OxyContin and then went to heroin. And I did not know that he was using heroin. The first time I saw him, now he would come home. He was working a job where he was out of town most of the month. He would only be home like 1 week out of the month. And, but when he was home, it seemed like the first day that he came home, he was just acting really strange. And I would have never guessed heroin, never in a million years. So one day I was out and came home and he was acting bizarre, just really bizarre. He started to mow my grass and he was doing this like motion, like, you know, doing like this and doing these karate moves and just acting strange. So I asked his dad, who was a police officer, I said, something's going on with him. And he said, call the police right away. I was in the house. By the time the ambulance pulled up, Brian had already passed out. He had already OD'd on the sidewalk, so he was laying across the sidewalk. The ambulance showed up and told me that they were going to use the Narcan and that they had a heroin overdose. And when I heard the police officer say a heroin overdose, I was just like in shock. It's like, no, not him. So that was the first time that I knew that he was using heroin.
The word epidemic gets used a lot these days, but it may be the case that that word is not strong enough to describe this country's recent surge in opioid addiction.
Drug companies supplied and pushed out highly addictive painkillers in the height of the opioid crisis. Taking a look at data by the DEA, 76
overdoses. They're now the #1 killer of people under the age of 50. More people die from that than from car crashes, HIV.
We turn now to the gripping images of first responders in action that are taking us into the dark trenches of a deadly and growing
part of the reason it's becoming so popular, it is cheap, way cheaper than pills, offering much of the same high to users at a fraction of the cost.
The images are horrifying and heartbreaking. A couple unconscious from a suspected drug overdose while the woman's 4-year-old
the
grandson
lungs begin working harder and harder to compensate. Fluid builds up in the lungs and they end up what we describe as drowning in their own fluid.
November 6, 2015, he was 33 years old. So Brian spent the night with me Wednesday before he passed. He passed on Friday, November 6th, and he had stayed with me Wednesday night. So he had laid on the couch with Betsy. Betsy was his girl. He loved Betsy. So the next morning, I went to tell him that I was getting ready to leave, and he said, Mom, he said, it's so peaceful here. I gave him a kiss, and little did I know that would be the last time that I would see him. I left this little note that said cereal and sandwich on the back of the door for him to take before he left. And he wrote this little note on here that said, thanks, Ma. Was so peaceful. Miss and love you and the Betsy Lou.
Yeah, going through withdrawal off of pain pills is kind of like having the flu. But going through withdrawal off of heroin is like having the flu times 10. All you want to do is just go to sleep, and you absolutely cannot. That's the thing that people don't understand either. When you become a heroin addict, it's about getting high at first, and then it becomes about, just maintenance using. And then people think, okay, well, why won't you clean up for this reason or that reason? That you just have to go to detox for 5 days and then you're clean, it's over. And that is so far from the truth. After the first time that I went to detox and I got out, I just remember sitting in my mom's living room and feeling like something was missing. The second time that I tried to get clean, I literally felt like I was going crazy. I couldn't even remember how to tie my shoes. At this point, I had had some sort of strong opiate every day for like 7 years. You can't just take that away and expect, everything to function as is. And I'm on methadone right now. And as far as I'm concerned, that is sober as fuck. And people have issues with that. People who obviously haven't been there will say that's not really sober. And that's bullshit. If you have, a heart problem or a disease or high blood pressure, you take a fucking pill. Well, I have an addiction, so I take my medicine every morning. And I absolutely function as a sober adult. And I don't have that feeling that something's missing, that vital organ is gone. Methadone saved my life. It hits the same receptors in your brain that shooting up heroin would. But that's the whole point of the clinic, you know, to regulate. And if you're on the right dose, then you will just feel normal. And some people do choose to get off it at some point. But for me, this is a lifelong medication that I will take forever, and I am 100% okay with that.
His dad had gotten a bed for him at, I don't even know if I can say it, Interval Brotherhood Home, which is a treatment center out on South Main Street. He didn't want to get help because he was afraid of losing his job and not being able to pay child support, so he refused treatment. Now, he did start attending meetings out there, but it was probably a couple weeks after that he was using again. He referred to it as demons. He says, Mom, he says, you just don't know the demons that I battle. And I didn't understand what he was going through. And I wish I would have talked with him sooner.
Help is out there for those affected by the heroin epidemic, but there are many reasons as to why these sources may not be efficient for those who are addicted. In some cases, rehabilitation centers will turn patients away due to their insurance. Others may feel as if they are not worthy of help. This is why it is so important for the conversation about drug addiction to become normalized and not something to be uncomfortable about. These are real issues and real people who deserve to get the appropriate care needed to overcome their addiction. When the world is mainly out there to judge and stigmatize these people, they are part of the problem just as much as the substances are.
Me, when he did finally pass, I felt like the stigma attached to having a son who passed from an overdose from heroin would be, what kind of a family did he come from? I was afraid to talk about it because I was embarrassed that I had a child that died from it. And I didn't want them to think of him as being a bad person because he wasn't. He was such a good kid.
You know, the relapse rate is 97%. What's the point of getting clean? I'm gonna fuck up anyway. It says that right here. But the truth is, like, you're not a statistic. You know, you can be anything that you put your mind to. And my husband and I, being sober now for 5 years, that, you know, was a big to every statistic out there.
When I hear of somebody that is going through recovery or going through treatment and has recovered, it just tugs at my heartstrings because I'm so happy that they were able to find help. I think I just want people to know that when they think of a drug addict, they are somebody's daughter or somebody's son. And they didn't choose it. They didn't choose to become an addict. They tried it once and they were hooked. I just think people need to have some more compassion. There just needs to be more done as far as treatment for them.
I'm a stay-at-home mom, housewife, which I absolutely love. I love waking up in the morning and making breakfast and packing lunch and making coffee. My kids go to a great school. Actually, I think I'm gonna get my realtor's license and work with my sister, which is very exciting as well.